Hello. Anybody who doesn't know me, my name is Mervyn. I'm the festival director of Open Book, and we are halfway through day 2, so I'm not going to do much talking. I'm just here to listen to these 3 fabulous people. Welcome to Created in Africa. This is... Okay, yeah, go for it. Yeah, let's go with audience participation and whooping right up, yeah. This is an event in partnership with the wonderful African Literary Cities Project at UCT, so thank you to Laura, to Paulo. It's been amazing to work with you guys over the last 3 years. And please find a way to carry on working with us. Start a new project. On stage with me this afternoon, is this possible? I mean, excluding me, this might well be the best dressed panel of the festival so far. I don't know what you think. That's what happens when you invite people from other countries, apparently. I'm going to get myself into shit now. Okay. On my immediate left is James Murua, literary activist, journalist, podcaster, all great book things person from Kenya. Next to James, Bibi Bakare-Yusuf, the co-founder of Cassava Publishers, who have done so much to publish amazing Nigerian voices and take them around the world to us and to other places. And on the far left, Mr. Wheatfield Rémy Ngamije from Namibia. Rémy first joined us at Open Book
2019.
2019.
Yeah.
To talk about his amazing debut novel, The Eternal Audience of One. And he's back.
Yes.
And he's back with a bang this year with one of my books of the year, Only Stars Know the Meaning of Space, a literary mixtape. It's a collection of stories, connected stories, but it's also a literary mixtape, and Remy's the only person I know who could get away with that kind of shit on the cover. Bibi, I want to start with you, if I may. I think what I think I'm going to start off with is just ask each of you to just talk a little bit about the work that you're doing in your different countries. Bibi, with you, it's Nigeria and it's the UK. So maybe if you could just talk a little bit about the Cassava journey and how you've ended up where you are now.
Thank you so much. It's great to see a great audience on a Saturday afternoon. Often Saturday afternoons I'm in bed recovering from the week. So thank you for showing up. Cassava Republic is going to be 20 years next year. So, and every time I think, thank you, every time I think about it, I keep asking myself, how did we get here? And I think it's an important question to ask, how did we get here? And we're here because I felt that it is not, I always say, it is not enough for Africans to tell their own stories, that we must always own the means of production. And where we lose out as Black people or as Africans is that we don't own the infrastructure, especially the infrastructure of the imagination. And it's critical that we do, that we own that, and we just are not site of extraction, that we are also site of production. And so that was the basis, the genesis of Cassava Republic, is finding myself in Lagos, going into people's book houses and looking on bookshelves and saying, these are mostly middle-class elite homes, and seeing books like Who Ate My Cheese, Rich Man, Poor Dad, Chicken Food for the Soul. And then when you have, and these are fine, these are okay books, but I just, my elite self, right, felt these kind of books are not going to take us from where we are to where we need to go as a people. It might enrich individual journeys and what have you, but we need something more. We need to be consuming ourselves, and ourselves across our differences. And I mean from Nigeria I always say from Benin to Bahia, that I want to know what's going on across the Black world. And so started in Nigeria, and I thought, okay, let me ask people who've got money, who are more business-minded. I'm coming from academia. What do I know about business? And the business people felt publishing, trade publishing, not educational publishing, there's no money in there. It's not viable. It's not commercially viable. And I am Nigerian, so there's a certain level of arrogance that what it means to be Nigerian. So I think, what is there? You just do it. Set it up, do Excel spreadsheet and stuff. And of course, Excel spreadsheet tells us 7 years, it was just saying red, red. And I kept asking, why is it saying red? It says it's not viable as a business. So I just, we'll just start. And we did. And here we are. And so we have published some really incredible writers from Nigeria. We published Teju Cole's first book, Every Day for the Thief. We published Helena Bila, Sarah Ladakomanyika, Lola Shuneye. The list goes on. And even as we were located in Nigeria, I was always interested in how do we reach other Africans? How do we communicate across our differences? So we reached out to Doreen Bangana, published as Tropical Fish, and others, Hidden Star from Celio Daika here. And it's a book that I absolutely, if there's a book on my list of favorite books, I think he's one of my all-time favorite writers. And I always have memories of going into a mall. I can say this story here. And a young boy was sitting there reading our edition of Hidden Star. And I was like, how are you loving this book? And he said, I absolutely love it. But did you know he died really? He took his own life. And I said, yeah. He said, oh, I wish I knew him. I said, you do, here. And that was such a gift for me to be able to bring one ancestor into being, because these are ancestors now. And so then I thought, after 10 years in Nigeria, I said I wanted to go back to the UK where I'd grown up, and I did. But also going back to the UK meant going back to empire and what that means, because whether we like it or not, we are conquered people. Whether we are conquered people in a settler colony like South Africa or in a non-settler colony, all of us, we are still ravaged by the history of colonialism or the afterlife of slavery is still with us. So I thought, I need to go back to the UK because African stories are circulated through London, New York, Paris. It is the factor of being conquered. People, we have to reckon with that reality. And so, but also it was a way for me to think about easy access to other black centers of blackness. And it has proven right. So we are able to access other writers in a way that located in Nigeria was a lot more difficult. And so nearly 20 years later, we are reaching out to more black centers of power, and we want to ensure that black people are speaking to each other in a way that is unmediated by white publishing infrastructure. Because, and the reason why I think, because as a scholar, I think it's really important that we own the means of production, because I understand what it means to edit and what the work we do in the editorial process, how we can change the raw to the cooked, right? And when you're the chef, you can do all kinds of incredible cuisine. You can determine how these things are circulating and stuff. And I really strongly felt, and still do, that we cannot just leave the most important aspect of what it means to be a human being at this critical juncture, our ability to think and to reason. We cannot leave it in the hands of the very people for whom we're supposed to lack reason. We cannot just entrust that to the infrastructure of whiteness. We have to participate in that in a really important and critical way. And that doesn't mean to say that white people or other non-black or other Africans should not participate, but it's that we have to be both gatekeepers and shapers of our dreams as well. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So my journey into the space I'm in, it starts in 2005. So I'll have been in this space for 20 years this year. And in 2005, I was trying to do magazines, like lifestyle magazines, and it was not working. I actually lost a lot in that period. But in that period, as part of my process of doing my magazine, and he said, we're having a conference next month, or the next month or so. And he told me that Aikweyama will be one of the guests, one of the headliner guests. And I said, I'd love to interview him. And he said, sure. And I went and I met Aikweyama, and we did an interview for, it was 1 hour of, half of an hour was he was explaining to me who I was, because I really didn't know anything about Aikweyama. Because the Aikweyama I knew was the Aikweyama of the beautiful ones are not yet born. And I'd never heard about him ever since that time. Then I'm asking him, I thought you were Ghanaian, why are you in Senegal? He had to explain to me what changed for him, why he started doing Parank publishing. And I got it, and after that, I actually started following this space. In Kenya, that was the period of the Kwani revolution. And I set up a new website called Nairobi Living at the time, where I'd just be running around with Kwani people. They do the open mics, they do their events, and I just write about them. And they invited me to the East African Writers Conference.
James, may I just interrupt you? Maybe just explain a little bit more about Kwani.
Oh yeah, there are
people here
who are much younger. Okay.
I talking to the kids.
I'm assuming everybody here is over 40. Yeah, so Kwani was a movement that was set up in Kenya in 2002. It was on the background of, there was a regime that was in Kenya that was leaving. And that regime had not allowed us to think. We were not allowed to be writers. If you're a writer, you had to go into exile. Ngugi went to exile. The two Ngugis went into exile. Michel Mugu fled the country. Everybody fled the country. The only people who were allowed to be writing people were the ones writing educational books. And the government was choosing which books were going to go into the curriculum. So in 2002, we have a new shift. We have a new Kenya. And Kwani is at the right place at the right time when suddenly you could be clever. You could be a black person who could be a writer. You could be a poet. And the most famous person in that space was Binyavanga Wainaina. He had won the Kane Prize in 2002. So he was a huge personality. Anybody who knew him, he was a huge personality. And he set up the Kwani Trust, partly with some of his winnings for the Kane Prize and some donor money. And so everybody just basically joined this movement. And it became basically the face of Kenyan writing was Kwani. So I joined them 3 years later because I was doing other stuff. I joined them 3 years later. And they invite me to this conference, writers' conference. And I'm like, this is really nice. I think I'll try this writing thing. And so I continued with my website. I got a job in the newspaper as a columnist. And that's why I went to learn to write for newspapers, because I just used to write my little blogs. And I'd write them. Sometimes I don't write for a week. And you go to a newspaper space, and suddenly you have to produce copy daily. And then you become an editor, so you have to manage copy daily. Yeah. So in 2013, I was in a bar. Many of my stories have this. I was having a drink with some friends. And then I met
I've heard this story before.
Yes. Whenever you hear my stories, they'll always be, I was in a bar somewhere anyway. So I was in a bar, and I met this guy from Cote d'Ivoire. He's an artist. And he asked me, what do you do? I'm like, no, I'm an editor and a columnist. I'm an arts journalist, because I was doing a lot of art reporting. I was doing books, visual arts, cinema, all of those reporting. I said, yeah, that's your Ugali writing. Ugali is our cup. Ugali is that's your Ugali writing. What's your writing? And it just hit me that I actually don't have any of my own stuff. All the stuff I do goes to the newspaper. So I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up my little blog, and I give it my name, jamesmurua.com. And the idea was I wanted to focus on African writers, because I'm in the business. I didn't think people were covering writers to my satisfaction. I said, let me try it out. Yeah. And I gave it my name because I thought if it doesn't work out, at least I can use the website for my resume. Because like people will register a name and then you don't renew it, but your name you have to renew it. So yeah, I started that way, and I did it for like 3 years. And then in 2016, I lost my job. And you guys know, when you don't have a job, you only get a job when you have a job, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't have a job suddenly. So now I have to do something until I could get a new job. So it's been 9 years.
9 years you've been doing something.
Yeah, but nobody's guide anyway. So that's the.
But have you got your resume on your site? I didn't see it.
I don't. So that's the short version of like the project that I started. So I've been running a briefcase operation where I just write every day about like what I see, what's happening in Africa and writing. And at the beginning, when I started, it was just me and Brittle Paper. When I joined, Brittle Paper was the only one. And then I joined, and it was me and Brittle Paper. And I would just obsessively write about, I just go on everybody's web. Like, if you're a writer and you have a Facebook page or a Twitter account or an Instagram, I follow you. Like, I follow you, by the way. So I'd go to everybody's account, and if you have new things, I'd post up. And I did that until at one point people started noticing it, because there are not very many people who are actually archiving African writers. So suddenly people like, okay, we see what you're doing. I started getting invited to places. I started doing more stuff. I was invited to my focus was really on East Africa, where I could go. So I'd go for Story Moja, I'd go to the Writivism. Yeah, so I was really covering everything. And then the last part that I need to highlight is in 2020. Before 2020, I only used to do Africans based in Africa or Africans in the diaspora. And then when George Floyd was killed, a few weeks or so afterwards, there was a hashtag publishing paid me.
Yeah.
And that opened my eyes, because I used to think that the only people who were marginalized were Africans in Africa. And then I'm seeing like Roxane Gay, this famous writer, got a very small advance for her seminal work. And I started investigating, and I realized that it's not an African in Africa problem, it's a black writing problem. So I said, you know what, I'm going to include writers from outside of Africa. So what I've been doing is I do stories. I'm one of the few people who write about black literature anywhere, as long as it's black writers. So Brazilians, I'll do Haitians, I'll do Afro-Germans. Yeah. And just because I've been saying this thing. So the project changed in 2013. It's now called writingafrica.com. And what I do is I write when the festival's happening, when there's news, like for instance, whether the Cane Prize has a shortlist, or the Prix-Goncourt has a black person, or anything like that has a person is happening. I'm basically the leading person in that space.
Absolutely. Mr. Ngamije.
Yeah, well...
maybe start off by, I've heard a rumor about salsa last night.
Yeah, we were out last night. We were dancing. And we're going out dancing again tomorrow night. But I'm here because you invited me. You probably invited me because in 2019, I was foolish enough, after the debut of The Eternal Audience of One, to decide to be active in the literary space from Windhoek in Namibia, and I co-founded a very small literary magazine called Duk, being the last phonetic endings of Windhoek, the capital city. And the idea behind this literary magazine was to showcase Namibian writing to ourselves, firstly, within the country, and then hopefully with the rest of the world. Shortly after starting this literary magazine, COVID happened. And everybody was stuck at home, and everybody suddenly discovered what the arts are for, to expand our space and get us out of limited geographies and to connect us. And this was a wonderful and golden time for African literature because so many things were on Instagram Live, people were suddenly accessible, and that's how that little magazine got picked up because of a literary festival I was on, started by Zukiswa Warner, called Afro Lit Sans Frontiers, brought a lot of interest to us. And then also that year I was shortlisted for the King Prize, which brought more attention to it. And the magazine suddenly became this platform where local Namibian writers could showcase their work. We published fiction, nonfiction, poetry, and visual art as photography and graphic design or anything that could be published online. So that's where that little project started. But, you know, again, being young and very, very foolish, I had ambitions beyond this little .com, and one day I found myself sitting in front of on my friend's couch, the Honorable Justice David Smuts, who's a Justice of the Namibian Supreme Court. He's a very, very well-known human rights activist around the world. And I was on his couch and I was having those, you know, delightful sense of youthful confusion. And I said, Dave, I want to do this, I want to do that, but I don't know how. And he gave me one of the best advices that, you know, he was listening to my goals and my ambitions, and he said, I get what you want to do, but I will help you, which is probably the most important thing that's been done for the Namibian literary community ever. And so I got the idea of formalizing Duk Literary Magazine into an arts organization that supports what the magazine hoped to do. Because the things that I wanted to do, one person could not do it. So I started the Duk Arts Trust, which has a board of trustees, of which I'm one. And our job now literally is to beg, borrow, and steal, like politicians, to fund literary projects, which has now expanded beyond the literary magazine to an award cycle we run every year, every second year, and a literary festival that we now run every second year as well. We've had the luck of publishing our first anthology of Namibian short stories, an adventure in publishing I will never repeat again. And our magazine expanded necessarily to publish Namibian African writers on the continent and African writers in the diaspora, wherever we might find and encounter them. The reason why we did this is because we understood that where we were publishing our literature from is not the biggest literary tradition in the world. You might know the country, you might know the capital city, but you'll be hard-pressed to really name 5, 10 writers from the country. And so for us, in this smaller literary tradition, it always felt like we were broadcasting from Pluto. Anybody who comes from a small town might know what that feels like, always like you're outside of the literary mainstream. South Africa, on the continent in literature, South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, Egypt, Ghana, and then silence. Generally, in the Anglophone-speaking world, this is how it felt to us over there. And so our mission expanded because of this, because we felt like we had something to give. Not a lot, but just something. And then we also wanted to encounter writers from elsewhere. This is very, very important to the work that we do, that we don't exist in an echoing chamber. And then we expanded to the African diaspora because I think it's also important for Namibian literary consciousness to encounter what other literary consciousnesses around the world are involved in. And that contributes to the absence contributes to not feeling so lonely in the world, like we don't have a role to play, like our writing does not matter, or our stories have no currency or relevancy. And so those are the things that we do that I think are the reason why I've made it this far, because the work that we do has really helped to platform Namibian writers along our continental contemporaries. And so every 2 years, Windhoek feels like a capital city because we have amazing writers from places that you would not know you would not ordinarily encounter. We've been able to meet writers that we thought we would only ever see on a bookshelf, if you are lucky to afford books and walk into a bookshop or visit a library. And that's the work that we do. But predominantly, she was talking about the site of production. My job really within Duk is to create writers that are then siphoned off here. I do not involve myself in publishing. We deliberately choose a very narrow mandate so that we are also not confused for the state. Because when you come from under-resourced communities, anyone who tries to do something that is activist in nature is confused for having the power, influence, and resources of the state. And that's how quickly everyone jumps on the same train, and the train track cannot support that infrastructure. So we have a narrow mandate deliberately, but our job really is to find interesting voices from Namibia, Africa, and the African diaspora, who we then expose to what we call the publishing experience: submission, editing, publishing. We expose a lot of the people we publish for the first time. They've never seen a publishing contract. They don't know what editing is. And our job really is to groom them or prepare them to the point where you might get a random email from Bibi that says, do you know someone from this background? I'm like, oh, we've got this and this, that, and the other. And they're not as green or as naive as one would expect. So we're really just preparing poets, fiction writers, non-fiction writers, poets, and visual artists for the wider world of publishing. So our real ethos is we want to be a platform and a first step for everybody. So if you have no biography or you do have a biography, we'd really like to be first published in. And that's our job. Because what happened, the reality is that when I got discovered, there was a lot of scrutiny around my work and where I was from and everything else. And then just the scrutiny created a sense of loneliness, and it was the idea like, I can't be the only one. And Namibia is one of the biggest diamond exporters in the world. And prospecting logic says that if you find one diamond, you're going to find more. And I just felt like there's no way I can be the only one in this country. So Duk exists as a small water hole that has wound up bringing very interesting things and people to our community. Yeah.
Thank you.
There's been, I think, quite a lot of talk. It's part of what it relates to different things that all three of you have said, but there's been quite a lot of talk, I think the last couple of days over the festival and other spaces as well, about notions of being African and how we are understanding that, how are we defining that. And I mean, the use of the word diaspora has been all over the place. And there's I mean, and it's coming in different contexts, right? It's coming in sort of straight political contexts around discussions around sort of reparations over slavery, which is a long journey. But it's interesting to me in a literary context, in a book context, trying to sort of play with those categories and understand the work that we're doing in relation to the continent and beyond, right? So, I mean, in terms of Open Book, for example, when we reconstituted after COVID, we were talking about this the other day. We made a very clear decision. We were just doing a festival for South African writers, and that was important in that moment. Became very important a year later to broaden that in terms of bringing writers from the continent, but no further, right? We don't want to bring writers from the global north. We don't want to spend that money, okay? But then you start thinking about African writers and African writers in the diaspora, and what is, apart from the costs, you know, what is the difference? Should we be making that distinction between people who live in Nairobi and people who live in New York or wherever? And I'm particularly interested, Bibi, in your take on this because of your movement, which is not a linear thing. You're moving backwards and forwards. You're not. It's not like you relocated to London and you never stepped foot in Nigeria. So I was just wondering where you are in terms of that conversation.
I think I enter the conversation from a place of Africans have always moved. We're people of movement and mobility, even prior conquest. And conquest or not, we're going to move. Human beings move. And ideas are always circulating and exchanging between people and across people. And as much as I would always want to privilege those on the continent, I'm also very much aware that there are other people, other Africans or other black people in other sites that might open up new worlds for us on the continent, and we are always going to be enriched by that. We're not going to be poorer for it when people are circulating and moving. And one of the reasons why I love cities, I love living in cities as opposed to living in rural or villages. You know, every time I go back home to our village, I'm like, I need to get out. Because I don't have a romantic view of the village life. I have a sense of city life is where all kinds of strangers meet and things are birthed in particular ways. And so for Yorubas, we think when people have come from abroad, they give us another perspective on how we see ourselves. They ask us to look again, right? And so what I see within the diaspora versus the diaspora wars, for example, is an unnecessary wars that we should be having, because those people that are, people are forced, they're forced to take to the road or to the sea, whether it's the historical diaspora or contemporary diasporas. And I would not want to neglect them because they've had to go abroad for all kinds of reasons. You know, Helena Nsue, the Egyptian writer, once said that you stay at home, there's pain. You leave, there's pain, right? Wherever you go, there's always going to be the pain of loneliness, whether you're at home, because when you're at home, the home is also not comfortable in that way. When you leave, it's also not comfortable, right? So you're always existing in this space of, in the God of betweenness. So I would always want to work between the two, but also at the same time recognizing that there's certain luxuries that you have when you're in the metropoles, right? But also there's certain luxuries that you have when you're in the colonies as well. Because when I mean the difference between me being in Nigeria, when I go to Nigeria, when I'm in London, is when I'm in Nigeria, I can produce more. Even though a lot of Nigerians say it differently. I can produce more because I'm not encumbered with domesticity. As just on a very simple level, I'm not encumbered with I'm in London, I have to think about washing and domesticities, things I don't particularly like doing. I want to just focus on thinking and writing and editing, right? So I think there are advantages and disadvantages, and we must always strive to bring people in dialogue with each other to see. But I also understand the cost. If you're a festival organizer, it's costly to bring somebody from America. I would rather, before you bring somebody from, as I'm talking, I would always also create hierarchies of needs as well. I would create hierarchies of need. If I'm looking for somebody to, when we did an editorial workshop recently, and we were very clear that we want people on the continent, right? We wanted to build the infrastructure of editors on the continent. We could have gotten people from Africans, we could have made it more open. But we didn't want that because we felt there was a need for that. And we had enough money to bring people from across the world. But we specifically, if we're going to spend the money, I would rather spend that money on people on the continent. So it's to think about at different points, what are the necessities? You know, this year you might think we're going to just do South African only, and next year we expand it to other Africans, and the following year you bring in one or two. So long as, for me, where I bristle is when a festival on the continent is dominated by diasporas. Then I think it's a problem. I think we need to find a way where there's both, not the diaspora, suddenly the superstars that have made superstar names, because all we're doing is reinforcing that who is exportable, who's legible first outside, and then they come back. And this is why I always say, you know, the UK is my first home, Nigeria is my second, and South Africa is my third. Because every time I come to South Africa, I'm always discovering new writers. Every time I go to a festival in South Africa, I'm confronted with strangeness in terms of people I've never heard of in the global north, and I'm excited about it. When I'm in Nigeria, most of the Nigerian writers that I'm going to see, they've been published abroad one way or another. But here, there's a kind of intimacy you find here. And that's not to say South African writers do not want to be exportable elsewhere. Of course they do, because you want to reach a more expansive audience. But there's something...
And they want to make money.
No, I think there's a myth about making money from books, whether you make it in the UK or in the US. And it's the lie that people tell themselves, that you are going to make more money in the UK than you're going to make in Nigeria or South Africa. There's a lie about it.
Depends how many books you sell in the UK. There's a handful of South African writers who sell well overseas, in the UK, in the US, in the global north, in translation, in French, in German, what have you. And what they earn from that is 60 times what they earn.
No, and that's a fact, but even in the global north, for non-South African, non-Africans, non-black, non-whatever, most writers, cannot survive on their writing. That's a reality. And there's a few exceptional, and the miraculous exception, let's call them that, the miraculous exception who might make more money. And I think we need to stop telling ourselves the lie that somehow you're going to make more money in Nigeria. I know for a fact, an author we published in Nigeria that made huge sums of money, like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in Nigeria, even after converting Naira to dollars, that they would never make, they never in lifetime made in the UK or in the US. So it's balancing act.
I think that's the difference. That's the difference with South Africa. Because there's nobody making that kind of money in South Africa out of book sales at the moment. So you're painting a picture of a very economically healthy book industry in Nigeria. Is that? No.
There's no. There's no economic.
I thought that might be too easy.
No, there's no economic. I think publishing in general, we have to understand publishing for what it is. It has a PE model, private equity type model, where you have one book that was going to bankroll 30 others. For us, for example, one book bankrolled us for 8 years, right? Allowed us to publish, I can't. allowed us to publish many other books, right? And that's the reality. You know, Harry Potter allowed Bloomsbury to publish hundreds and hundreds of books, and that's a fact. And so we need to understand the reality of the industry, the business of publishing, not just the art of it. It's both an art and a science combined.
My just a small add-on is like, what counts as an African writer, or what the work that I do is, what it has shown me is that at least that, again, narrows down this mandate that is always in danger of being overblown, is we know, or what we've seen from the African literary track record, is that writers in the diaspora, the ones who are doing the writing, are often in a better resourced situation. Okay, so when you are in a better resource situation, she's talked about a hierarchy of needs. You are not our priority. You can be included, but you are not the priority. Hence why it's always Namibia first, Africa, and then African diaspora. This goes into everything that we consider. For example, when you have literary festivals, where are you? Because we're not flying you from New York, all right? But if you can get yourself somewhere on the continent, then the board of trustees might be a little bit more amenable. Is it north of the equator? Is it south of the equator? Because these things have a big determining factor, because the Namibian dollar doesn't go far. So if you are in Accra is here. But if you're in just one border over in Ouagadougou, this is going to be something else, all right? So these factors play. It means that, okay, we'd like to get this person from Ouagadougou, but it's going to cost us more than it would to get 4 writers from Botswana. These types of things come heavily into play. And when we curate things like our festival, festival is probably the biggest undertaking we have on our platter. These things come into play. Where are you, and are you under-resourced? So, hypothetically speaking, even if Chimamanda was in Lagos, we're not flying you from Lagos. Chimamanda, get your flight here. Or, we engage in this negotiation process to make our process possible, because we don't sign checks willy-nilly. We're just not that organization. We fundraise aggressively for what we get, and what we get is not always what we asked for, all right? This is just the reality of where we are from. But what is African for us is not necessarily conceptually hard to understand. We take writers from Namibia wherever we find them. We publish writers from the African continent wherever we find them. But we do have a soft spot, and we lean towards literary traditions that are not often seen on the page. So our submissions are currently open. We've got, let's say, hypothetically 100. We know 60 to 70 will be Nigerians. We're going to make Nigerians fight for that one publishing spot. But there are 3 Mozambicans and 1 person from Cabo Verde. We have to look at how we're going to get these voices in, because we know Nigeria has a lot of literary magazines already. We know the Nigerian brand is powerful within literature, so we're not saying that they are going to be picked up elsewhere, but their resources are better over there. All right, so we slant our focus towards smaller literary traditions. And we're very proactive about that. Sometimes we'll be like, James, we need somebody from Guinea. Have you encountered work from a young writer of somebody in Guinea whose work we can showcase? On Jackie, do you know photography in Angola we can showcase? Those kinds of things that we do to ensure that we have some sort of representation. The reason why we're able to do this is because we don't have to make profit from what we do. If we had to account for every dollar and turn every dollar into 5, this would become very different. We would go with what we know. Yeah, we would go with what we know. We would be like, get Nigerians on the page. Because they come with literary equity. They come with audience. They're tied with institutions. We would have every Iowa Writers Workshop Nigeria at our festival, because they come with a lot of things that we don't have. But because we don't have to make money from what we do, we can take risks, serious risks, that a publisher who is accountable for an advance that we don't have to, we're not accountable for those things. We're only accountable to show that the work that we do to our board of trustees, they have to show that this means that they add something valuable to our literary community, that they're participative, that, all of these romantic ideals about what art is, right? We only have to show those to justify the money that we spend, the little that we do get, but our work can be activist in nature, because like what Bibi is talking about is true, because we don't have to multiply this money. We have to get it, and we have to show that we spent it on a literary project. And that allows us to get away with the fear factor of like, this is not profitable. That writer you brought didn't sell seats because our festival is free. Our anthology is sold below cost price so that more people can get it. Our magazine is published online for free. There's no paywall. We pay our writers when we can, if we have the funding. If we don't, we don't. But that idea of like, we have to make money from this is something that were the script to flip, Duke would go out the window immediately. Yeah.
I just want to jump in here about the diaspora.
Did you just start with hi again?
So here's the thing for me. When I started the project, one of the things I noticed is that the people who were really getting platformed were South African, Nigerian, Kenyan, what was the other one? Egypt.
Kenyans, Ghanaians, Egyptians.
Egypt. Those are the people who are really being platformed in the African literature space online. And of course I started there because that's what I knew. I'm really grateful to the Africa 39 project because that's the first time I saw a list of Africans that were not from Makerere in a group. You find you find that project was in 2013, and from before that period, the only time you can find a group of people of African descent was Makerere University in 1962, and then I'm talking about those who are Googling, but even scholars, you'll find very information about writers from the 70s, from the 80s, from the 90s, and what I was trying to do with my project is like, we're not going to fall in that trap where stuff is happening around us right now, and then in 20 years' time, people will be like, what was happening in 2025? So that was the project, the way it began. I started trying to expand other African peoples into my reporting. So where do the diaspora come in for me? The diaspora people are also marginalized. This is something I noticed. Most people assume that because I'm living in London, or I live in Berlin, or I live in New York, the capital. You said London, New York, Paris.
And Berlin now.
And Berlin. You assume because the people who live in those spaces are better resourced. It's not true. They are in spaces which are better resourced, but they usually aren't themselves. Themselves, they're not better resourced. So you find that I'll do a story where Olumide Papola, she lives in the UK, but she's from Berlin. But if you Google Olumide Papola, she maybe somebody did a little thing about her like 5 years ago, or she curated the African Book Festival, and then she vanished off the scene. And what I'm trying to do with my project is saying the diaspora person is just as important because they're still Africans. And there are two things that it helps both of the African and the diaspora person. The diaspora person actually is connected to the people who are based on the continent. I don't have to spend money to bring them to my website. I just bring them on my website by doing a story about them. So I'm helping the diaspora person to connect to their African black roots. Then I'm helping the local person because if I'm going to do a story and I have somebody, I'm trying to think of a new writer. I'm trying not to say that, but let's say Terry. Maybe Terry does a story. She has a new book out, and she'll say that I'm in the same website that is also featuring Marlon James in Jamaica. So it's actually benefiting both the person in the diaspora and the person locally. So for me, I'm looking at it like you're trying to build a community, trying to build an archive, all of those things using a website.
I'm not entirely sure what happened to the time. A little bit of where did that go? So I'm sorry about all the other things which were, I thought, an important part of this conversation. I have to open it up, but I think that this is, I think, and I trust that all three of you are going to hang around for a while afterwards, because I think that there's lots of conversations that we can continue having downstairs. But I just want to give people an opportunity from the audience. CA.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think that was one of the most inspiring conversations I've had really for years about publishing on the African continent. So 2 small questions for you, Bibi. It's been really incredible watching your trajectory as a publisher for the last 2 decades, and the fact that you have succeeded. You know, I mean, we've literally watched cassava grow over these many decades. So that's been in itself a really wonderful thing to watch as a South African about indie publishing. And so I wanted to ask you, it almost sounds like you use a not-for-profit model, and what you think of not-for-profit as in the publishing industry. And then the other thing is, was it Sarah Lapido that kind of, I heard that I heard that book sold a couple of million copies in Nigeria, which blew my mind. So if you can't answer, but a little wink might.
I can answer, but I might get into trouble.
Yes, to your second question. Third, to your first question, I think all publishers, even if you're registered as a for-profit, you're all non-for-profit, really, right? Is occasionally you're lucky, and you get a windfall, and you keep going. So, we are just, it's the roots of profit that we keep hanging on to. But generally, we are registered as a for-profit, but because we're ideologically driven, it means that we cannot publish certain types of books that would make us the kind of profit that we should be making.
Rich dad, poor dad.
Can you explain what you mean by when you say you're ideologically driven, therefore you cannot publish certain kinds of books? What does that mean?
Yeah. So if a certain military leader in Nigeria wants to publish his biography, who I know that definitely the book will just go off the shelves, right? I would not publish it. There are certain types of books that I would not publish because I think trees should not be falling for certain stories.
The monk who sold his Ferrari.
And stuff. So it's just simply as that. And also, our first priority, we're an African publishing house, but we focus primarily on publishing Black writers first. Occasionally, if a white writer is writing something really incredible about Africa in a way that is generative, that is, I've not seen another Black person writing about it. We have a white author at the moment who's working on a book on women in Guinean war, for example, in Guinea. I'm welcoming that because I want to read those kinds of stories. So it's those kinds of things.
I've got a question about promoting African writers out of Africa. Is there, are any of you doing that in terms of selling rights to publishers beyond the continent? Is that something that's been done actively?
So I'm not involved in publishing, but every once in a while my literary agents will ask for any exciting voices that have come across or through Dook, and I am more than happy to recommend and help people connect, provided that you've come through the magazine, for example. I'm not a literary agent, and so if I were to say, I help people connect people with literary agents, my inbox would be flooded. But if you've come through our ecosystem, last year I wrote more letters of recommendation than I did short stories. So we do that kind of work to try and connect people with opportunities elsewhere. People apply for MFAs, I write a letter of recommendation. People want an introduction to this person. If it is within my means, within this small ecosystem, then we do that. But in terms of rights, the first time in the country's history where someone actually spoke about publishing rights was when my literary agent came to the festival and had a whole workshop about this thing. And so people are a little more resourced about that thing, but I'm not involved in publishing, so I think that would be.
We do try and sell rights to our books to other foreign language publishers, but we also understand that some of the books that Cassava Republic chooses to publish might not be something that most black publishers would necessarily want to publish. Sometimes it takes them a few years. So I give you an example of one particular author that I just thought the book is just phenomenal, it's beautiful. And I was trying to sell the rights to American publishers, to French publishers, to Italian, Spanish, all of that stuff. And all of them said no. And I was like, okay, fine. You will come back, and I'm going to give you 2 years to come back. And we published the book less than 2 years later. They all came back wanting to buy. So there's a time, I'm always grateful that publishers like Cassava Republic exist, publishers like Mujaji exist, because the kinds of risk that we take, many publishers will not take those risks, right? Because publishers are what we call in Nigeria, they're follow. They just follow, and they don't take any serious risk. Only small indie publishers take the risk. And once they've taken the risk, then other publishers will follow, right? Marlon James was published by One World Press, Akashic, for many years. As soon as he won the Booker Prize, Penguin comes running. But when they're still at the early stages, they're not taking that risk. So we will always endeavor to try and sell, because you want the books to circulate, but you're not going to wait for the translators.
Can we get a mic here?
I just wanted to mention that I'm not in publishing like the two of them, but what I like doing is that whenever there are translations of books which are come out, I make sure I cover them. So when books come out in German, French, Italian, Amharic, Kiswahili, and it's available to me, I'll always do stories about them. Part of the problem we have is people aren't doing stories about those things. So you don't even know that there's a translation or they're available for sale. So that's what I do.
I wanted to ask about, so you publish mostly in English, right? Or, how do you, so if you don't sell the rights to an American or Canadian publisher or a New Zealand publisher, can people access the books in those places? I mean, I know that your books now do come to South Africa.
Yeah, we distribute through Ingram, and they've got a very good foothold in America and in Canada and in Australia and in all those other spaces. So yes, our book go very, very far. I was in Maldives and I saw a couple of our books there, so that was gratifying.
Very cool. One last question. Right front. Sorry, I know we're over time. I'm allowed.
My question is for James. I'm just curious, what about a writer or what they're writing and their books captivates you enough to want to put them on your site and to push what they're doing?
So there's too much happening for me to be able to read everything in a whole continent. I mean, there's 1.2 billion people in Africa right now, and there's more diaspora people. So what I do, I have systems where I look at the people who are publishing. So if Bibi is publishing something, it means it's good, because she should not give up. So I have a system where I look at the publishers who are doing good stuff. I follow the journals like Duke. When Duke publishes somebody, I know that the quality of the work that Duke does is good. And what I tend to do is I follow. Like, for instance, if something comes in Duke, and then I see it in Norway, and then I actually put a mark on this person's name. So what I've been doing is basically have lists where, like, okay, this person's, then I start to read them, and I try and see if they're interesting. So it's a process of, in the past I had to read all these books, and I had access to very little books. But with the interwebs the way they are nowadays, there's Duke, there's Lolwe, these guys in South Africa, there's Johannesburg Review of Books. So I'm reading all these magazines, I'm reading the books. I'm on in Cassava Republic, for instance, when she has a black Women's Prize, the Global Black Women Prize, I immediately have those women that are long-listed, shortlisted. They're on my radar, and I start following them. Yeah, so that's my strategy.
And can I just say something? One of the things, when we started, and we will send our books to media houses in Nigeria and across the continent, and sometimes you get press releases, send them out, and you get silence. I always say to my team, don't worry, Bristol Paper or James Murua will cover us. And it's always really gratifying to know that there are two people. Now there are more people, and we get books, we find authors through reading blogs like yours. We read journals and like marking authors and seeing what they're doing. And now with, what's that platform again? Not TikTok I love. No, the other one, Substack. So that's another place where you go to look for authors and find new authors and stuff.
Yeah. The one thing I don't do is I don't look at follower numbers. Because apparently that's a thing now. People are looking at numbers. Because some of the best writing doesn't come from people with 20,000 or 100,000. So that's something I'm conscious about.
I look.
But also like a platform like Writing Africa is very good for people, for like Duke, because whenever we have a submission call, that platform amplifies.
Yes.
And so you get submissions from interesting parts of the world. The other day, for the first time, I got a submission from a Namibian living in Tahiti. What are you doing in Tahiti? But, and then you ask where they found it, but it's like, I follow Writing Africa and that's all these things. So again, this ecosystem of publishers, of people writing about the publishing industry and people trying to nurture people for the publishing industry, it seems to yield fruits every once in a while with all the labor that goes into it. I think all of us are just trying to stay in the game
also,
long enough.
Can I just say one thing? I found two authors here this week, yesterday. Ornithologist, the one does study of birds, and she specializes in the prey, particular prey. So she's going to be writing for us. I met her yesterday. Another one is doing paleo ornithology. Again, some fancy something. And both of them are going to contribute to a project we're working on. So it was fantastic. This is also a space for finding new people.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Okay, having opened the door to go over time, I need to get it closed very quickly, otherwise I'm going to be in deep shit. Just again, thank you very much to the African Literacy Studies Project. Thank you to these three absolutely wonderful people who have been enriching us for the last couple of days and the last hour and a bit. It's really, really special to have all three of you here.
Thank you.
And please, let's continue the conversation downstairs.
Yes.
And lastly, I just want to say we are, over a day and a half into this festival. We've been absolutely pumping. I want to say a huge, huge thank you to all of you who've made this festival.
Yes. I'm done. Thank you.